Hello class, so this is our recording for Art and Society, and we're going to discuss this with a very sensitive topic on cultural appropriation and a little bit an extension of the indigenous arts with focus on the Cordilleras. Anyway, it says here for the situating art, how do art, we have some warm-up questions here. How do artists continue to affirm identity? When you see painting, you can immediately identify. Yeah, paintings, since they have assumed identity, has become a brand in itself. So parang alam mo yung si Antonio Luna, yung si Picasso, okay, yung si Manansala, Guillermo, etc. And it's just like um, when we talk about indigenous art, it is not an individual brand, it is a collective brand because these are articulating a group of race, ethnicity, class, okay, etc., etc., gender. So the problem is, okay, we're going to discuss here some concepts which are probably new to you. It's called cultural appropriation. That's the word for today. Anong ibig sabihin nito? Okay. So we have here an article by the professor of law, um, Professor Olufunmilayo Arewa. Sounds like African, I'm not sure. Okay. So, sabi niya dito, when borrowing becomes exploitation. Basically, yung ibig sabihin ng cultural appropriation, tingnan natin, what do you have in mind pag sinabi mong cultural appropriation? Bakit hindi na lang sinabi na cultural borrowing? Iba kasi, no, pag when you borrow something, you return it and you do not get the credit for it. But cultural appropriation is probably something else. Is it a crime? Okay, so let's find out. Okay, so sabi dito, the idea of cultural appropriation has recently entered mainstream debates about the ways which, yeah, African nga siya. Okay, he's an African. I was talking about, because Africa is also very rich when it comes to culture, okay, material and non-material. So here we have an example, and let's see uh, if this is something that you would agree on. Okay, kaya nga siya debate, no? So, noong daw 2016, may African-American woman na nasa San Francisco, tapos kinonfront daw niya yung isang white student. Kasi itong white student na ito ay naka-dreadlocks. Alam niyo na ibig sabihin ng dreadlocks, no? Ala Bob Marley. Kasi, dreadlock naman is really an Afro-American um, hairstyle. And for you to see a white man do it, wear it, is hindi mo alam, mo offend ka ba kung ikaw ay, parang ikaw igurot, nakakita ka ng hindi igurot na nakamaong, nakamaong, akala mo nakatapis na. Kasi sa inyo lang ang Levi's na maong yan, parang sa atin lang ba? Hindi. Dreadlocks has become an identity of Afro Americans. And so he kinonfront niya ito and then nag-viral daw and it was viewed 3.7 million times. Dapat ba niyang ginawa yun? Ang dreadlocks nga ba ay hindi pwedeng gawin ng isang African or tayong mga Pinoy? Bagay ba natin? Bagay o hindi? Karapat dapat ba nating gayahin yung dreadlocks ni Bob Marley o kay mga Africans? I don't know. So we have here, it is kaya nga debate. So what do you think? Let me know your comment below. Should we or should we not do dreadlocks? Tayong mga Pinoy or an American or somebody who is not an Afro-American, African-American. Okay? Yes or no? Ganun lang. Okay. And then maybe a little bit of why. So yun nga yung debate, no? So, mangyari kasi, is it okay to borrow? So cultural appropriation therefore has an element of borrowing. However, it also has an element probably of cultural insensitivity. Sabi nga niya, no, she argued that okay, debates about appropriation are always limited to cross. Hindi ito simple case of cross-cultural borrowing. Okay, meron kasi itong elemento na parang may slight mo yung mga tao pag ginaya mo ito kasi siguro dahil hindi mo bagay or mas bagay mo, basta feeling nila Sila lang yung may karapatan na magkaroon. So they would feel slighted. So we're talking about a case of cultural insensitivity. Probably not about ignorance. Kasi alam naman natin siguro na, ang tapis ay para sa mga, Igorots and dreadlocks are for them, but probably it's more on cultural insensitivity. Kasi parang may element siguro ng exclusivity. This particular cultural um, lifestyle is just for us. So probably they would feel offended if you would do it because you are not part of them. So you are an outsider, okay? You are an intruder trying to misrepresent yourself. Okay? And therefore, by misrepresenting yourself, not being you, it's just like wearing the wrong uniform. Okay, you're slighting the people, for whom that uniform is meant for. Siguro ganun na lang yung pinaka-simple analogy natin dyan. Okay? So, moving on, we have here a history of extraction. During the dark colonial past, people's history, cultural borrowing was done by force, and it was a twin or akin to cultural extraction. And there is a sad story here of, a culture that was looted because of its riches, and eventually um, the culture died, and it's really sad story. However, the case of cultural appropriation is just like subtle stealing, and in a way it doesn't kill directly, pero parang it's slowly leading to the annihilation. Hindi kagaya ng, analogy dito na napaka-brutal, but today iba yung klase, no? The problem with culture is that it's fluid, it's dynamic, it's subject to change, and it's subject to assimilation, borrowing. Okay? And in the end, hindi mo na alam kung kanino. Parang damit na pinagpapasapasahan, hindi mo na alam kung sino yung original na may-ari. And we have here accusations of cultural appropriation. There is important questions about the nature of culture. Because in reality, mahilig tayong mangkirap. Madalas hindi na binabalik. So the fairy tale of Cinderella is an example. The story of Cinderella is, sino na nga ba kasi yung original version doon, di ba? Na nagkaroon ng Cinderella ng iba't ibang culture. Meron nga Pinoy version eh. Okay? So, that is a problem. With cultural appropriation, it is innate. Napaka-fluid kasi ng culture. It actually flows. So, there is actually, this is the gray area when we say we really cannot totally hold culture. We cannot keep it we cannot bind it within the geography of, say, the Philippines Republic or America or Japan, kung lalabas man doon yung kanilang mga kitana, yung mga kimonos, mga ganon. So, cultural boundaries are fluid and shifting. Cultural systems may be significantly transformed by different forces and influences. This means that incomplete discussions of appropriation may fail to account for borrowing discussion, blah, blah, blah. Okay? So the problem is when borrowing becomes appropriation. When you say appropriate, kaya ano nga ba yung English ng appropriation? Let's probably go and check it out with Webster. So here you have this dictionary definition. Okay, it is an unacknowledged or inappropriate adoption. Yun nga, dreadlocks. It was also given an example. So gumamit ka ng isang bagay. So parang kailangan mo ng damit, pumunta ka sa kwarto ni ate kasi wala kang costume. Okay, na kailangan mo sa school o kaya for that occasion or for that date, wala kang sexy date o kaya yung polo ni daddy, wala kang pang first date. Okay, so kinuha mo kasi wala siya or ayaw mong ipaalam. So yung parang ganon. And the original owner would complain that, hey, that shirt is mine, or bag ko yan na, yun yung shoes ko yan eh. Okay. Then you would say, hinihiram ko lang. Okay. But then it doesn't belong to you. So here are some examples of images. And so the problem arises when it probably looks awkward. Like, okay, this guy's here looking so awkward in, okay, whatever, okay, you know, like, just these dreadlocks. Ganun, parang mga kurado sila ng unang panahon. And yeah, you might even be accused of being a racist because you don't know how people will take it. Okay? So here are other examples. Hindi lamang siguro dreadlocks. Or like, imagine a guy going on tapis, or maybe us going to wear something which doesn't really belong to us, and it doesn't feel, it doesn't look good, it doesn't fit. Okay? But artists sometimes would be covered by this um, artistic license. Okay? And in a way, they have this blanket of protection. But for us, maybe not. Okay? Like, yeah, sure, she tries to look like a geisha, but it looks awkward. Parang ganun, no? And even this lady here doesn't look like a Pocahontas. Parang trying hard in the thing. I don't know. But anyway, going back to the module, that's what cultural appropriation is. Some lines are not meant to be crossed because it's exploitative, it's offensive, it's insensitive. Okay? And that is the problem. It can lead to a lot of crimes, disrespect, too much disrespect. Okay, and it happens across the globe, hindi lamang sa Philippines. Okay, here we have other examples here. You just have to read through the examples, but okay, yeah, there's even some lawsuits here, but you know, when a group of culture does it, okay, pwede bang nagkaroon ng legal battle yan? Yeah, I guess so. Okay, like kunyari, I don't know, but there has to be a legal process there. Okay? So when patterns of borrowing fail to acknowledge their source, yun, okay, it is a crime. It can be they are. Okay. Wala pa tayong batas na nag-penalize ng cultural appropriation. However, it goes beyond the law. Parang ano na yan, naging, it's already like part of a human rights thing. Okay. It's a crime committed against a collective people. Okay. It's a crime towards an identity. Okay. So like this one, there was a case here. Okay, basahin nyo na lang ito, but this is a very private story, so I'm not even going to discuss that. So how to block exploitative practices? I think when we talk about, well, ignorance leads to crime. So the opposite of ignorance is, of course, knowledge. We have to be more knowledgeable, so we have to be more sensitive. So knowledge is everything. If you're not aware, okay, if you're not aware of other people's rights, if you're not aware of the law, but we need probably more laws to give, put some boundaries, to put some ethics, legal ethics into how culture, okay, must be treated or must be represented. Okay, so we have some points here raised, okay, when it comes to appropriation. Ownership, okay, we have to, be sensitive of the owners, be it a person or parang copyright kasi kumbaga sa libro eh. Okay? So hindi kailangan i-copyright, probably kailangan i-copyright ni Wang Ud ang kanyang mga tattoos. Otherwise, yun nga, there comes Nas Daily taking advantage. Okay? Of course, it was a case of gross cultural appropriation yung ginawa ni Nas Daily. Okay? So, yun nga, refers to borrowing. Okay. Kahit sabihin pa niya na new art form or is a business, pero hindi. Or kahit sabihin pa natin na, okay, merong okay, means of experimentation, changing the context, ay hindi pa rin eh. Okay? In fact, culture does not really, there's no room for reinterpretation. And the artist established original artwork in the new context. Artwork can be appropriated in art. Okay? Pag sinabi mo na may artistic content element, hindi pwede. So, yun nga. Sa cultural elements kasi, ang art, kunyari sa tattoo, sa mga designs, hindi mo kasi pwedeng i-twist yung design. Parang yung bayang magilo, hindi mo pwedeng i-reinterpret na yung tune or yung melody. It has to be interpreted exactly as it is. That's why, like, awareness has to be worn like awareness. A tapis. Minsan ginagawang shawl, yun yung problema dun. No? Appropriation is different from copying or forgery. A forgery is with intent, but appropriation is probably out of ignorance sometimes. Ganon, di ba? You copy, you know that you are copying. You forgery, you know that you are forging. Like yung art. Okay, but appropriation, hindi mo alam. Borrow lang, hindi mo alam. Hindi mo na pala naibalik. Okay? Alright. So appropriation allows the viewer to recognize the origin of the borrowed images as well as the origin. Okay, and so, ayun nga. There is an element of copying in there, okay, but probably intended or unintended. And there are other major points raised in here. Culture refers to a specific type of form of intellectual development. Parang ano kasi, parang yung sinabi mo na, look, when you try, for example, to consider costumes, like the Iboloys have this preference for the whites and the blues, and the Kalingas, okay, for the reds and the blinks and the shells, ganun. So parang naging ano na nila yon, intellectual property rights na nila. So alam mo na pag ganun yung tapis, you know, it only belongs to the Kalingas, to the Bengues, to the mountain province. Okay, hindi pwedeng sabihin ng mountain province na, can we have a little bit of the shell? Ganon. So even if they have they must know how to put it in a way that it's distinct and uniquely a mountain province tapis or a Kalinga and not a Kalinga. So types of cultural appropriation, we have object appropriation and the content appropriation. Object appropriation refers to concrete and noticeable works of art. And it happens to the tangible work previously owned by people from one culture has taken and adapted by a person or a group person from another culture. Siguro sa exam, magbibigay ako ng halimbawa nito and you will have to guess if it's object or content appropriation. Okay? Noticeable works of art. Tangible. Okay. Then yung content appropriation, adoption of works of art that are short stories, poetic, kagaya na yung Cinderella, yung musical composition, no? Okay, so kanyari yung, pag yung bahay kubo natin may ginawang, you know, a tiny house, or ganun, or the nut house, or the straw house, ganun. Happens in an intangible work that was adopted by another person. Yun nga, ginawa na niya yung style o kaya yung motif. Okay, pwedeng, the artists do not replicate works created by a person. They use the elements of those works in creating their own. So parang, you know, kinuha mo yung style niya. Okay? Yung ginawa mong sarili mo. So kunyari sa pag-rap. Okay? Probably, you know, it has something to do with, parang you put a little bit of your spin, pero yung base mo ay somebody else's work. Parang gano'n. Then yung motif happens in an art inspired by the art of a different culture, but they do not produce artwork using exactly the same style. So motif. So anyway, you might find these gray areas and you might think, well, art has the, parang wala na bang freedom? Mali ba yung ma-inspire ka sa work ng iba? Parang gano'n. Free naman yung inspiration, di ba? Or reinterpretation. However, probably, yeah, well, since wala kasing batas na mag-draw ng exact line, okay? Now, oh, nire-interpret mo nga, but if it's still probably being recognized by the original owners as theirs, then they know what's originally theirs, di ba? Then it's still an appropriation. Kahit na sinabi natin na safe ba to, may element of degree of safeness, it's still appropriation. So we probably see different levels of appropriation. Okay? Pag pinasok ng culture yung art, artistic interpretation, probably that's the trouble. And then we also have subject appropriation. When a subject matter from another culture is appropriated. Example would be a British writer creating a story about Pacific Islanders. Okay? Like, gawa tayo ng kwento ng when another culture would try to write another version of our Ibong Adarna. Ganun. Kapitan Barbell. Walang Kapitan Barbell sa Marvel Comics. Okay? Tama? Pero does it represent any other superpowers? I don't know. Okay? Parang Superman na may barbell lang, di ba? O kaya si Darna, Wonder Woman lang na walang lasso. Okay? Medyo tayo pa, ang galing nating mangopya, tinitwist lang natin. Okay, anyway, so we go on to the art from the Cordilleras. Okay, it's very much our very own. So we have here our map, we have here our history introduction. You just have to read through that. But so going straight to the point, we are a region that is easy target to appropriation, cultural appropriation. Other than what happened to Wangud, marami pa pong nangyari at nangyayari. At sana wag mangyari. Okay, there would be a lot of cultural appropriation that might be going on if we are not aware and we have the following elements of art, and areas could easily be exploited for cultural exploitation. So starting off with the material culture, that is wood carving. We have already discussed this in a previous slide share, but here we go again, the buluri. Looks like we have many different versions of the buluri. Okay, this is more or less going more polished. Okay, hindi yung traditional. Okay, buluri. Okay, wood carving. Okay. So, assuming that somebody would try to reinterpret this buluri and try to be given a credit to a particular artist. Let's say a modernized version of buluri. Of course, it's not possible. It would be a gross. Okay. So no touch dapat ang buluri, no matter how gross it looks like. So hindi mo pwedeng bigyan na ng bronze hair o kaya bigyan na ng mas tangos na ilong. Okay, that's really not. Okay. It would probably try to be guilty of those kinds of appropriation that we have discussed earlier. Okay. Intangible appropriation. Because it must be carved from a block of wood, it must be colored, okay, it's dark, and it should be sitting with a closed arm. Hindi mo pwedeng gawing oblation yan. Then we also have the kinabigat. Okay, relief is hindi siya full relief, so it is carved. Okay, hindi siya full carving. It is used as the entrance to the hut of granary. So andun pa rin siya nagbabantay. So it's the guardian. So we also have the Pukok. In the Ifugao, the Hagadi, yeah, we also the Hagadi here is also mentioned. And we also have the pigs and the crocodiles, the Binabi. The coffins are also given sculptural relief. The crocodile. We also have the Kaptagu. household utensils seen in handles of vessels, ladles, and spoons. It is designed like a miniature balloon. It can also depict animals with the pig being most common. Um, According to Guillermo, there are similarities. What another great area that we should be uh, in the concept of cultural appropriation is, well, cultures do have this wave of borrowing, especially from due to history and neighboring communities. So just like the observation of Guillermo when he said that, you know what, okay, yung kinabigat natin, okay, eh parang may similarity sa Conwar ng New Guinea, yung Papua New Guinea. So probably our ancestors, have that, or probably during the time of, okay, the bartering and goods have been exchanged, and they, you know, uh, in the spirit of goodwill, people try to, okay, exchange these goods and they try to copy. Baka nga hindi atin ito talaga eh, malay mo galing sa Conwar, no? Mga ganyan. And probably it has evolved into our own, okay, symbolism. So anyway, that's another gray area. However, okay, today I think when people try to be more sensitive of um, uh, human rights and cultural rights. I think ngayon lang lumalabas kasi ang mga ito. Otherwise, noong unang panahon, hindi naman issue talaga. And there's no such thing as called cultural appropriation. But people know, okay, which one belongs to theirs. And even pottery, we also see semblance, okay, in the designs traveling from one culture to another. Take, for example, the pottery of Japan. Japan pottery were actually accused of borrowing the designs and motifs from Korea. Yes, Korea. Because some history books will say that the original potters of Japan were actually Korean slaves. And some of the designs, especially in the white clay um, pots, were actually done by Korean slaves. Okay, na eventually na-adapt na present na Japan or Japanese pottery. Okay, so things like that. And marami din mga kwento, no? So medyo may mga highly debatable talaga itong kwento ng appropriation nito. Okay? So yun lang yung sharing natin dito kahit konti na lang. Then we also have baskets in the Cordillera. Okay. Well, we also have baskets in the lowland areas, and it's possible that there's been borrowing when it comes to, okay, style and weaving. Okay. So pwedeng mangyari din na ganon. Okay, baskets. Okay. Okay, here is an observation from this guy named Robert K. The will and soul of the maker in the form of structure of the basket is not tradition alone that determines its visual, okay, properties. Okay, ang sinabi niyo dito, okay, the property of the material is also, well, the property of the material na kung saan hiyang o kaya saan galing yung basket na yun also adds authenticity, okay, to and the identity of that material. Kaya it probably keeps integrity, kaya hindi pwedeng makopya siguro ng iba because not only the style but also the material being used. So for example, the tatami of Japan is very unique because the tatami is made from a very specific Japanese grass. It's just like our bahay kubo is made from a very specific kind of bamboo, from the roof to the stairs. That's why nobody can patent the bahay kubo because it is ours. The materials come from us. And the nature of the materials adds uniqueness and integrity to the whole structure. Okay, so many things, okay, other things that were included in material culture is the pasiking. Okay, the pasiking are otherwise known as the backpack, also made from rattan. You know, I remember my grandfather doing the split rattan, okay, when I was a kid, and they would use it to carve for, catching mudfish. Okay, and so it's still an extension of the material being part of the identity, okay, of some uh, baskets and basketry, okay, being associated as a unique Cordilleran material culture. Okay, other than the baskets there, okay, and the kayabang, okay, and you also have the textile, okay, yun yan. Um, the CHED now, or I think we now have a law which will actually try to encourage the creation of some designs or motifs, okay, for party. Like if you can create a motif that will represent your own culture, parang you're as good as an inventor. Ganun. So ang trend ngayon sa cultural preservation is also trying to explore new cultural motifs and designs. Siyempre, hindi mo pwedeng baguhin yung isang design or baguhin, but you can actually make one, but it has to gain approval, okay, by the very people that will use it, and of course, by the NCAA, National Commission on Culture and the Arts. Ganun po yung motif. Yun, the X-diamond motif. Kasi some of these motifs have been aged, okay, like yung X, okay, the buaya, the crocodile. This has been, nobody has a particular credit for it, but it's been a group, okay, pattern. Ganun, no? Zigzags, okay, the mountains, the rivers, okay. May mga ibig sabihin po nito, mountains, rivers, mga ganyan. No? So please also try to read the specific symbols, okay, being discussed in here. So yun lang yung ating pang summary. Then you have, of course, adornment. We have the famous Apuwang Od ng Babato. So it's not only in Kalinga, it's just that sila yung huling gatekeeper ng ganitong, okay, tradition or body of adornment. And yun yun. Ang huling mambabato ng Kalinga. She actually has nieces na nag-a-apprentice. Tinuturuan niya. I think the story goes that marami siyang pamangkin. But pinipili niya kung sino talaga sa kanila yung nararapat na papalit sa kanya. So eventually, there's this transmission of this mambabato tradition that's going on in the family. And I think we don't know kung sino sa pamangkin niya ang talagang papalit sa kanya. Okay, but I think it's being trimmed down to 2 or 3 ganun. I don't know. Okay. So yun. Eventually, we pray that the tradition, somebody in the family will really, okay, get her skill or her gift. And so we should keep the tradition alive and the skill. Ayan. Kasi nung unang panahon naman, tayo naman talaga ay pintatos. Okay? And then we also have folktales. Okay. Itong mga folktales, ito yung mga alamat, mga ganyan. Okay. Mythology, kumbaga. Okay. So we have this folktales. It's also part of our non-material culture. How rice and streams came to be, for example. Okay, the folktale underscores the value of sharing the community, the resources of food. So andyan yung, okay, if you would read into this folktales, mahaba po yan, mahaba. And it's usually written in the dialect, in Kankanayan, Ibaloy. Okay? But, and walang particular author kasi it's actually a collective story. And it's been passed on orally, verbally. And probably in the act of verbal, okay, storytelling, baka nawawala na nga yung original, baka na-shortcut na. Parang yung kwento ng gulong-gulungan. Okay? Why some people have spare skin, okay, meron din tayong story on the body, ornaments, okay, the Dumaria and the Apian. Yeah, the Dumaria, okay, fell in love with the snake who was kind to her and built her house. She got lost in the forest. Okay. So yung mga ganyan, mga kwentong, okay, kwentong kaigurutan, kwento ni Allapu. Hindi lang kwento ni Lula Basya, kwento ni Allapu. Kwentong Dapay. And you can imagine, yes, during the time of the Dapais, okay, these stories are being told mga around, mga ganyan, during social gatherings, mga ganyan. Okay? When people are not resting and working, they are, you know, storytelling. Performance and ritual, we also have a lot of performance and ritual. Madami po ito. From the Kanyao okay, to a lot of performances that would include dance. Of course, we have the Mumbakis as major players for the ritual, and we also have, okay, for the performance, we also have key players in there, keepers of this tradition. Unfortunately, ngayon, medyo nawawala na nga yun, no? But lalong-lalo na kunyari sa mga dance, bibihira na nga yung marunong sumayaw. It's something that you have to learn. Wala kasing mga designated na masters of dance, ganun, or mga maestro. Okay? Unlike the Mumbaki performance arts in the Cordilleras must be learned for those who are ready and when the opportunity presents itself. Problema, nawawala na yung mga opportunity. No? Kung konti na yung nagkakanyaw, yun sa kasal, you must learn how to do the patong on your own. May ganyan. Kaya nga, a revival now is through the education. We have the School of Living Traditions, SLT, and we also have, you have to watch class. There's going to be, as per CHED memo, subject or curriculum that will be on IPs, okay, indigenous culture, and it's going to be called Heritage 101. For now, it's brewing, so you have to wait for it, and probably you will be required to take this in the near future. So with that, thank you so much for listening, and it's a wrap, okay, for this module. Salamat, arigato.